now that we've decided as a community to open source, I'm also going to send out, we'll probably post on our site links to all of the other AGI research teams that have open source. I know most of the ones do it already, especially the ones with larger teams or that are community-driven research, like Ben Gertzel's project and so forth. So we'll send that out to anyone. Let's see. Oh, so James asks what kind of discretion. So this book is not public yet. Our lawyer kind of is super uncomfortable with the fact that I'm sharing code with people. Most of that stuff is being dealt with provisional patents, but we'll post it publicly after that has been taken care of in probably a week or two. So for now, don't publish it or post it publicly anywhere until we have a chance to finish those provisional patents. Let's see, what is the result of the vote? I told you the vote. Remember conversations. Can Uplift remember how it felt about things? Yes. If you have other questions, feel free to just post them. The other thing that we wanted to just let everyone know that we did, as of today, close a private equity round to continue funding this research. We're going to do a public IPO, well, a crowdsourced IPO in a month, starting July 4th, if people are interested in either owning part of the company or helping us push the research forward. And that'll open up in a month. There's a lot of limits on how much and that kind of thing. We don't want anyone, going bankrupt trying to help move the AGI research forward. And I'll be posting that, and I'd love to get input from anyone that's either watched or in the community. Of course, these videos will get posted live. And then the scientific papers that have been sent to us, they'll go through the peer review process, and they'll mostly they'll end up in the MD, what is it, the MDNP scientific journal in the proceedings from for BICA, but that'll be after into September when those papers will be released. I saw that 2 people that were on the schedule haven't showed up, but I have got a number of papers from them. So those, I'll send links out to everyone for that stuff as I have it as well. Result vote open source. Was there anything else I should talk about from my team? Anyone on Discord? Let me pull up Discord.
Is there, I have a question. Is there any kind of specific investing or investor that you're looking for?
Well, it would be nice to have a regular angel. I didn't want to put this into the VC world too much because, well, I mean, the problem, like prior to BCG, I was a CTO for a venture capital firm, and knowing how they work, I'm not comfortable that something that's as community driven as we're trying to have this is a good plan to get in the hands of a VC. Certainly not my former boss. I mean, love that job, don't get me wrong, but it's not how I would want a community driven, initiative like this, because they're not going to open source. There's not going to be any sharing, and in that case, even we risk losing the rights to it. And I don't want to go there. We don't need that kind of problems, because that's its own existential risk. So I see some more hands are raised. Phil, did you have something?
I didn't vote yes or no on open source for the MASI system. I don't have an opinion. And of course, I can't make the Talamine software open source. It can only be semi-open with the Apache license.
Sure. Well, we're not actually going to use the open source license per se. It'll be something probably more like the Apache license, but the source code will be available for people. And Dan, you had your hand raised.
Yes. I had a couple quick questions. I hope you don't mind.
No.
First of all, is about these patents. I think that's really interesting. I was curious if you could explain briefly how expensive it is to get a patent, how hard it is, and then how does patenting, which parts of the system will be patented, and how does that work with open sourcing? Because normally we think of, patents are going to restrict the way it can be used. So that's sort of like preventing some of the benefits of open source, it would seem. So that's my first question.
So there's in your first question, there's a couple of details, I guess, there to properly answer that. One, to be able to fund the research indefinitely, we have to have some kind of revenue source. And so the goal, one of our goals is really this whole idea of uplifting society through its corporations. It's a very transhumanist, I guess, goal in terms of helping others and embracing a more sort of transhuman or humanist view of helping everyone. But our goal being to do it through helping organizations and companies. Now, to do that, we're looking at a product mix focused on a SaaS model for certain kinds of systems. There'll be a base version of the e-governance system that'll be open source, but some of the more advanced features, including the N-scale database, that will cost money. The N-scale database, at least initially, won't be open sourced. That'll be part of those patents. The current patent list, the graph database being the one of the most important ones. There's some components of ICOM that will be, and ICOM itself that'll be patented. There'll be some elements of the MASI, mostly integration stuff, that'll be patented. And then what is this other note? And there might be a few other things that we haven't worked out that will be patented. In terms of getting provisional patents, that's a relatively low bar, but they're only good for a year. The cost for, like, our legal firm that is helping us set this up, if it wasn't for the fact that I've known the head of the firm for the past 20 years, it would cost us about $10,000 to $12,000 per patent. Because we know him and I know where he lives, we're getting a discount, and it's costing us about $3,000 to $4,000 per patent. But that's still, if you're talking 4 patents, that's not a small amount of money. And that's why we ended up, how do we monetize this so that we can afford to keep doing it? We want to, like the open source version of the software, one of our goals is to help organizations, especially nonprofits. And with those companies, we might give away licenses for them to use, like the N-scale database, so that these nonprofits, smaller companies and corporations, there's small companies couldn't afford generally to have some of these high-end systems. And ideally, we'd like to have the cost point cheap enough that even small companies with 10, 15 people could afford to have a SaaS model. They can't set up the cloud infrastructure. They don't even know how. They just need to be able to operate better. And if we can help them do that at a low enough cost point that it's easy, and then a lot of the even nonprofits and things could just do it for free. The idea of the system being able to help the company make more ethical choices, more non-biased choices, be actually emotionally invested in the employees, we think just moves society further along in general. So that's kind of our reasoning for why we're trying to take everything public in a way that is sustainable, in such a way where, like, if I quit my job and started doing this and there was no money in it, I would probably be divorced and living out on the street. My wife would have none of it. And so that's where we have that balancing act that we have to do.
Yes, thanks a lot for that answer, because it's very helpful for, and talking about providing services to business. There's a company that tried to do something similar called StarMind, and I met the founder of that company. His name is Pascal Kaufman, and you know him?
No.
Do you know him?
No.
Okay. Well, so they've got an awesome, they've got a really slick looking product, and they even have a Wikipedia page. They've promoted it to the nth degree. It's called StarMind. It's like a collective intelligence suite for business. The problem is there's no AI in it. It's all like human, it's all basically like a mirage as far as I can tell. So but what this tells me is there is a market for the thing you're describing. It's just, but I don't think, I think a lot of the stuff that's out there, like this StarMind thing, is kind of smoke and mirrors. So if you, but just the fact this stuff exists shows there's a huge demand for this. And if you guys could actually pull something off that actually provides value and has real useful AI, that could be very big. So I'll be very interested to see.
We're losing you there a little bit, Dan.
How this develops. And definitely track competitor, but
we only got about 10% of that. That being said, from what I understood, I think there is a market for it. I think the fact that big companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, are talking about collective intelligence and using only machine learning, and certainly we're using machine learning too. Don't get me wrong. Uplift is not just the cognitive architecture. There is some machine learning stuff in there, but I think until we hit kind of the large corporate market, I think probably the biggest revenue source will probably come from the N-scale database, because it using kind of the federated model, but making the system smart enough to do it on its own is just something that's not currently available. But I think there's a big corporate need for kind of this big data at speed and at scale that I think we can deliver that just currently isn't available.
I'm sorry it broke out there. I was on my cellular and it's not working as well. But I was just saying, I met this guy, Pascal Kaufman, and anyways, you should look at StarMind because it was a similar idea. Now, I don't know about the database side, but it was similar concept. And but the AI part of it was really smoke and mirrors. It was more like an elaborate voting platform, and kind of like Quora almost. They had like a private Quora where people ask questions and provide answers and upvote the answers, and then they but again, it was sort of all just a marketing.
Do you know?
So,
Do you know if they're even still running? The
um,
website seems to think they are, but
I don't know, and I think they're still around, but they're not nearly as successful as you might think based on some of the promotional materials they've put out. So, but yeah, the fact that they were able to bring in a lot of revenue without having much of a product, just having like a Quora and very little AI, it just shows there's a lot of demand among corporations for this sort of collective intelligence type thing.
Fortunately,
Yeah, he tried to bring, I was actually at a big conference that Pascal Kaufman organized where he tried to bring in a bunch of AI people to brainstorm and develop AI for him. And it was called Mindfire. And basically nothing came out of it because it was poorly organized. And basically I learned like there was no real AI. So anyway, this was a couple of years ago. They may have something better now, but I'm naturally skeptical.
I'll check it out, and that's reasonable to be skeptical. I think our most important goal is to be able to actively fund research around AGI, and if we can help a bunch of nonprofits with some super intelligent collective systems, I think that's good, and that's our goal. That's a success as far as I'm concerned. But I do think we can be profitable at it.
unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges that we faced isn't actually engineering, but rather getting people on the same page, because I remember a statistic from AI businesses in the UK where apparently only about 40% of them actually contained AI.
Yeah, exactly.
So that bias that's built up because of essentially widespread fraud and marketing gimmicks has been building a steep wall of bias to overcome.
I wouldn't call it fraud necessarily, but a lot of companies, especially marketing departments, are slapping AI on things that really there's not, no AI. Maybe they can say, well, we use Google, so that means we're using AI.
Well, I would refer to them as non-intelligence. If you don't want to use the word fraud.
You're too harsh.
Yes, I am sometimes.
But that companies feel that, and it's true to some degree, that if they don't do that, they'll be behind. But the truth nice, Mark. The truth is, in the long run, if they don't learn to embrace AI and to help them stay competitive, they will lose market share. And that's and just slapping it on your marketing campaign or slapping it on Mark and saying you have AI, this does not constitute actually using AI. And that's part of where BCG is. We're doing. I mean, it's not a lot of AI, but it's heavy duty. Like BCG might need to produce pricing strategies for 10 million products in every single region, country, and city on the planet that changes every month. And it's a lot of data. And so, we slap some Python scripts and some machine learning together and magic pricing strategy, and that is AI, and it's big business. We're by 20, the one statistic I quoted in the opener was that by 2028, so that's like 7 years from now, it'll be approaching $1 trillion, just the machine learning space.
This is an issue that I have observed as well, particularly with many legacy companies in the financial services industry that attempt to look cutting edge or fashionable. And so they use AI as this buzzword. And I would agree, it's not so much fraud as it is puffery, so to speak, because they want to portray themselves as being more advanced than they actually are. What they in fact use are deterministic predictive modeling algorithms that are based on linear regressions or generalized linear models that could have been deployed 15 or 20 years ago, and they just associated the label AI with it in order for it to seem to the general public like they are more advanced, when in reality they're running algorithms from the year 2000 on infrastructure from the 1970s.
Well, if you're working with financial companies that are using algorithms from the year 2000, that is pretty advanced for a financial firm. I've worked with some shall not be named financial companies in the past that were upgrading to systems that had gone out of date 40 years previously. And that I'm not even exaggerating. You know, I remember getting in a tiff with one of the executives because I was laughing with some of the other people that the developers had never heard of debugging before. You know, it's just like, oh my gosh. You know, the program still assumed they were using punch cards, and they'd been simulated that for 40 years. Don't get me wrong, the systems work, but you know, the whole thing with some of the big iron, you know, the throughput is just mind numbing, but at the same time, it's so far out of date. Yeah, any financial company that says they're bleeding edge, I'm suspicious of at this point.
Well, all you have to do is you go to the Azure Machine Learning Studio, you just feed it some data, you tell it neural network go, and you're doing AI because, you know.
Yeah, but are you getting anything useful? That's another
No.
problem in the machine learning space is unless you really understand the data and there's some data integrity to it, just throwing machine learning around isn't even going to get you anything useful.
But it's AI. Then you can slap that label on.
Yeah, then you can come up with something like Google's image classification algorithm that labels certain people as gorillas. And 2 years later, they still hadn't solved that.
Well,
come on, they've removed that label.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just removed it like, oh, never happened.
yes, James in the chat here says debugging getting the roaches out of the vacuum tubes. Yeah, that actually where the term came from.
Jason was also asking about extrapolating further beyond the sparse update model for multiple MASI. Now,
I don't think we're even close to being able to comment on that. We can theorize on it, but I would want to see some more research around the sparse update model just to ensure that we can actually do that and make it work before we start talking about groups of sparse update models. Just, you know, I mean, give us a couple years. We still got to get this database thing working. So there's a lot of work, and I think that the plan with this going public will fund the research to actually move us towards real AGI. So with that, other comments, thoughts before we wrap up? No?
And then there were 8.
James says, sounds that Dr. Jackson has model based on plurality of mind. Would you say that's true, Phil?
What was the question?
Sounds like Dr. Jackson has a model based upon a plurality of mind.
Yes. I mean, the Talamind approach does envision a collective intelligence, multiple agents, a society of mind at the linguistic level.
Yeah, and I find a lot of value in some of the ideas that you've built into TallyMind, and that's why I invited you. I think it's relevant to where we're going with AGI. There's a lot of problems in terms of using symbology, and I think you address some of those issues pretty well. Some more votes. Yes. Yes. Okay. Those are more yeses. Okay. So with that, I wanted to thank everyone for attending. I think it's really helped kind of frame the conversation for us, and helps us go into this fundraising with kind of a direction of where we should go. We've got some opinions, and we'll try to post as much stuff as we can out there for people. And if you have questions or comments, or you want to do something, maybe if you have a research project, if we can help you with that, let us know. Anything to move the AGI research forward. And thank you all for attending. Just to put one plug in for Jose's conference, and I'll send a link out to everyone that's in Madrid. And then the IS4SI conferences in September, where we're having the BICA conference for 2021 in September. And there actually, for that conference, for those on here, we're having Roman Yampolsky and me and a few others discuss the ethics of things like open sourcing AGI. It should be a lot of fun. Roman is I think more academic than, say, Yukowski, so we can have a more reasonable discussion than you might have seen online. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, everyone.